So today we're going to be going over the director example shows, and you may not know that there are example shows because I find a lot of people don't, and they're a great way to learn how to use directors. So here's how you access them. You go to frightedias.com/examples.html right here, and you get this page with all these different shows right here, and you can see they have numbers next to them, and if you click this you get a little pop-up window that explains what each show does. So you can go through and kind of read up and get an idea of what the shows do, but we're going to kind of go through the step by step so you can see what's happening. So you can see here inputs, what the inputs and outputs are set to, how to customize it, and more details and everything like that. So, and this is example 201, which is important to remember. So you come over here to your director program, you hit open, you go down to download a show, blink, and you hit 201. Now I already have the show, so it's going to ask me if I want to override it, and I'll say yes. And as you can see here, it's pointing to where it is in the shows, and there it is, and we select, and here it is. So one of the things I always like to do first is hit settings to fly this out so I can keep an eye on everything here. And I go over to the show settings tab to see what's going on. All of these have been clicked as a single shot input, these 6 guys here. Oh, by the way, I want to mention something. Over here on this examples thing, it says supports up to 6 buttons or sensors. Now that's this particular show is programmed for 6 buttons or sensors, but you can do all 8 if you wanted to. So don't let this fool you. You can use more than 6 in a show like this, just so you know. So these are set for single shot, and as you remember in the last video, that means that if the button is being held down, it won't loop. It'll just count as one single press instead of multiple presses, like that. And the normally closed output here is means that that's a maglock, most likely. And so that means that this output here is on at all times until this blue field gets filled in. We'll talk about that later. Also, you'll notice there's only 2 outputs being used in this show. So 16 output controller is a little bit overkill. You probably don't need this. You probably don't even need a flex max. You could use a flex because no, actually I take that back. You can't because they only have 2 inputs. So you actually need a flex max for this, but you would only need the 4 output for that. So flexes only have 2 inputs, so forget I said that. So you go over to scene settings, and let's see what's over here. Not much is happening here. All the stuff is default, just like this. All these only changes here. Everything else is fairly default. And you'll notice we're on the success scene, so we need to go to the idle ambient, the first scene that your controller would start on. So again, nothing really is happening here except for this. Interruptible by 1 has been checked. After scene go to is ready to go to itself, as you can see here. Now you can either have it tell it to go specifically to this scene, or you can have it say this scene. And ambient is the only one that the ambient scenes are the ones that for some reason say this scene. Everything else has to be specific to this. For some reason, don't know why. Anyway, so what's happening is this is waiting for input 1 to go to scene 1, or as I call it, scene 1, input 1. So now this goes here, and you'll notice that this is set for 3 seconds. This is a 3-second timer. And so empty scenes like this can be used as timers. And what's happening is if you don't hit button 2 by 3 seconds, it's going to go back to the ambient scene. It's going to reset itself, which means you have to start the puzzle over again. You'll also notice other input go to is also set to the ambient idle scene. So if you hit any button other than 2 in this situation, then you go back to the start and have to restart the whole puzzle over, or if you don't do it within 3 seconds. So that's what's happening there. And all of these, scene input 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, these are all basically clones of each other, right? So 3 is here, and it's, you go to input 2, it's waiting for input 3. You go to input 4, and it's waiting for input 5. So these are all just kind of the same. Everything is the same until you hit input 5 itself. Now you hit 6, and this goes to your success scene, which is here. You'll notice that this is turned on, which means that you are now lighting up an LED, because it says win light, and you're unlocking your maglock here, because this means to turn it off, because it was set for normally closed. So this now is opening your maglock right here. And this is all happening for 5 seconds. And you'll notice nothing else is capable of happening here. And what's happened is after scene go to is set to idle. So this actually resets itself. it is set to auto reset. So if you hit the buttons, now obviously you don't want to set this up as like, let's say you have 6 buttons on a panel. You obviously wouldn't have the code be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? You would have it be like 5, 2, 1, 6, whatever. You would change this to fit where, or align the buttons in a different order than left to right. So anyway, this has auto reset itself. Now, if for some reason you don't want it to auto reset, what you can do is you can come down here to after scene go to. This is set for ambient 1, wait for reset. So now when this is done, this would go to this scene, and this just sit here and loops continuously, and your maglock stays unlocked so people can't close the door and lock each other in or something like that, which is always a good practice. Have your maglock stay powered off until the game is done. This is very important, and fire marshals love this, by the way. So now this is waiting for input 7, which would then take us to reset. And all this does is this is like a half second, if that, just scene that resets everything back to kind of where it was, and then shoots us back to idle, which is now the game waiting state. So this is just a very simple input sequence show. Nothing too fancy here, and that's how it works. All right, now we're going to move on to example 202 here, which has the input sequence. It's the same thing, same concept as this, but it has feedback. It has sound effects, and it has lights and stuff like that. So we're going to take a look at that. Same kind of thing. Download a show, 202. I'm going to overwrite it, of course, and then we go up, and boom, there it is. All right, let's fly that out. So now show settings. Let's take a look. Single shot inputs like last time. Normally closed output 2 like last time, but we've added this other one here. We've got output 3 is normally on all the time. Normally closed, sorry. So that means if you look over here, our third input is a red light, which means it's just a red light that is on all the time unless something happens. And we only have 3 outputs, so that means you only would need a 4 output flex max if you were doing this scene as is, basically. Scene settings, as you can see here, we're using the multi-input go-to in this situation instead of interruptible by. And in this particular show, this is not necessary. You still could use interruptible by, but I think this is just showing you you can use multi-input go-to to accomplish the exact same thing that you could up here, right? So these are, right now, these are interchangeable. If you needed the sequence to be something like press button 1, then press button 3 and 4, then press button 6 and 1 together, that's what you would be using multi-input go-to for, is if you needed to have multiple inputs triggering a scene. So, but we don't have to worry about that right now. We're just going to go with what's here. You'll notice that there is a other input, so if you hit any input other than this, you're going to go to what's called the bad scene, and of course this scene is just looping itself. So let's take a look at the breakdown here. You've got wait for reset, which was what we had last scene. If you want to do the manual reset, you have input 1, 0 as the good input, and then input 1, 1 is the bad input, and then these just repeat. Again, these are all just repeating each other from like the other show. These are all copy and paste of each other. And then you have your success scene, you have your fail scene, which means something has not, which is the opposite of success, clearly. But that means something has not happened. And then you have your reset scene right here, just like the last show. So if we're looking here, waiting in our idle scene, and we hit in multi-input go to 1, and it goes to good 1, you'll see here that this is on. And when I hit this button, plays a sound effect, and you'll notice it just blinks the red light. So this is giving you a feedback that the button has been pressed by blinking the red light and playing a sound effect. And apparently, there's also this little rando rogue output here that I'm guessing they left in just to show that you could have something else going on. And we look over here, you can see that if you don't put in the output, if you don't hit the next button, input 2, after 3 seconds, you're going to go to a fail scene. And also, if you hit another button, you go to what's called the bad scene, which is like this or this. We'll just go to bad 1, and it does the same thing as good 1. Plays the same sound effect, lights the same light, But what happens is at the end, you go to the fail scene, which means the puzzle has failed. You've done something incorrectly. And this is the fail scene right there. And so now when this is over, it goes back to idle, which means you just start the whole process over again. All right, same thing, start from 1. So you hit the good button. If you don't hit the next right button in 3 seconds, you go to the fail scene immediately. And if you hit the incorrect, you get that feedback of the button, but you then go to the fail scene. I do want to point out a couple things here. One, you technically don't need a bad scene for every scene. You could just have one bad scene because these are all set up to go to other input go to. So you could just have a bad scene, right? You could set up an ambient 1, 2 and have it be the bad scene unless something different happens for each bad scene. If you press this and then one of the other outputs does something different. Similar to what's going on here in the good scene. So you'll notice here this output would be like doing something here, and then good 2 would be doing something here. So if you had to have something different happening on each bad scene, you would need each one of these to be different. But the way this is set up, you technically would only need one bad scene to then go to the fail scene. And what I would also suggest here, because you've got a 3 seconds here, and technically you can't enter another input after this. I mean, technically, it says here you can, but I would make this scene a lot shorter, because waiting 3 seconds to find out if you screwed up or not is a little much, I feel personally, from just making games. So I would shorten the bad scene down a bit so you immediately know if you failed. So after that button press, the fail scene would play immediately instead of hitting the button, waiting 3 seconds, then finding out you failed. That's just me, though. So anyway, going back, everything is on repeat. Hit this, 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 sound effects, lights, and then of course you hit your success scene, and now the red light goes off, your maglock unlocks, your green light turns on, and
congratulations.
You play a weird sound effect right there. Congratulations. And again, this is set up to go idle. This is set to go back to self-reset. Resets itself, like this. And again, you can change this, just like the last show, to go to your waiting for reset scene. So one more time, is now sitting here. Everything is still in the success scene setup. And now you're just waiting for button 7 to be pressed to go to your reset scene. And your reset scene is then going to go to here. Now, technically, you don't need this reset scene, by the way. You don't need this waiting to reset loop. You could here, when you press button, you could have so right here we're going to input 7. That's the reason for that, is that we're doing interruptible by. Technically, you could use multi-input go to go to idle from here like that. You could just hit this to this, and it would just reset for you. So that's just also something that I'm showing you. You don't need, technically, a reset scene like we have here. So there you go. And that is input sequence with feedback. All right, so the next show is called 4 Keys, and as you can see from the write-up here, it says trigger different scenes, and the number of keys found has increased and will not trigger again if the same key is used in another switch. It can also be used with like buttons and sensors and things like that. So let's take a look at this. Let's look at our show scenes, settings, normally closed output, which means we have a maglock here, and we have this thing here that says in idle. And you'll also notice that the show scene has been fixed, like it is at a fixed, it cannot move from that particular spot. And that's really about it on here, it looks like. Let's go to scene settings. You'll see, again, the fixed length is at 5 seconds. And you can see here that we're using multi-input go-to for this, as well as this thing right here that I didn't really talk about too much last time, because it really needs to be used in this context to understand. So you have the one of the selected inputs. So right now it's looking for one of these selected inputs, and so this means these can be done out of order. Right? So that means we're looking for all 4, but this, with you using this, that means that one of them can do something. So we have multiple options is what's going on here, right? And then everything else seems to be normal. You know, your after scene is doing its looping thing, and whatever this is, this in idle, whatever this is actually supposed to be, is just on right now. Okay. So let's say we clicked on, or we inserted key 1. One key in. Boom. One key in. And it plays a sound effect.
One key inserted.
Right there. So now it is waiting for 2 of the selected inputs to have been done, right? So right now, let's say key 1 has been done, right? So that one has been done, and there's not much. And right now, it's doing this. It's going to wait for 2 keys. You'll notice here, after this scene is done, and this is a fairly long scene. This is like a 45-second scene right here, or excuse me, 38-second scene specifically, I guess. But after this scene, it's going to wait for 2 keys right here. And you'll see the same kind of thing is happening right here. 1 key in. Now, obviously, chances are something like this kind of game, you're not going to have all the keys right. It's not like pressing buttons, or it's like button 1, button 2, button 3, button 4. Chances are it's like each key is in a puzzle that has to be solved. So it's okay to have your scene be this long right now. It doesn't have to be like 5 seconds or to the show length or anything like that. So in case you're wondering why this is so long, that's why. Because you won't be like getting all the keys at once. All right. But this is still set for 2 keys in right here. You'll notice that just in case for some reason that does happen, this is still ready to go, but chances are you won't have it. So now it's just basically going to the waiting for 2 keys. So this is set up here. And this is probably also set up this way here. So in case you're resetting the room or have to play through it, something like that, this is so the game masters can go through it fast. They can get through the show pretty quickly right there. So again, you go to wait for 2 keys, which essentially this is now a new idle. This is like idle 2 is what it's doing, because it is looping on itself, and it's waiting for 2 of the inputs to be found, right? So this is one of those games where you can have like parallel gameplay where multiple puzzles can be happening, which means you could open up like a puzzle. You could open up a puzzle for key 4 one game, but then somebody might get the puzzle for key 3 quicker in a different game. So that's kind of what's happening here. So again, this is the same thing, but now it's looking for 2 of the selected inputs, and so now 2 keys in, and which plays your sound effect.
2 keys inserted.
Right. And again, now it's waiting for 3 keys, and most of these kinds of shows are just the same thing over and over again, except in this case, it's just escalating each scene. So now it's waiting for 3 of the keys to be done, right? So like, let's say that. And so what's happening here is even if you have these other 2 and you turn these 2, it will not do anything until 3 inputs have been triggered, right? So if it's because 2 have been triggered, they're not going to keep triggering because it's not looking for 3 of the inputs like that. So just so you know, that's what that means. Again, go through all the same stuff: 3 keys, 4 keys. So once all 4 keys are in, this is waiting for 4 keys. And you'll notice here this is changed to all selected inputs. So now all 4 of these have to be done. You could go to 4 of this. You could just do this. You could do 4 of the selected inputs, but that's no reason when you could just do all. Okay. So now it goes to 4 keys in. This plays your success sound effect. Opens your maglock.
All 4 keys have been inserted.
So there you go. And then this goes to a wait for reset scene, which is here like this, and the maglock is still open, and of course it loops on itself, and it's waiting for scene. You can do interruptible by 8, which is now your reset scene to go back to your idle scene, just like the other shows have done like that. So this show is basically mainly to show you how this function works, and it is the selected inputs drop down is basically what this is for. So it's a good thing to have when you need inputs that are out of order. All right, so there you go. That is the 203 show. All right, on to the next show, which is Find the Artifacts. This is if you have, like, let's say some items with RFID or reed switch or just any kind of sensors and stuff like that. This would be a good one. This is a good one for RFID type like stuff. Like if you have little statues you have to put places. So let's take a look at it. So as usual, show settings. Let's see our normally closed outputs. We have a maglock, as you can see here. This is going on, and nothing else really seems to be. Nothing really seems to be going on. There is some dimming that has been enabled here. I don't know if that's just because. And we'll go over to scene settings, and you'll notice we're back to the interruptibles here, like this. We also have, you'll notice, re-enable. The re-enable inputs has been checked here. Okay, so we'll talk about that in a second. Let's see here. So we're in our ambient scene. We're doing our waiting thing, going through, and of course, interruptible by. Now, when multiple of these are checked, that means you can have multiple things happen, right? So any number of these will do something. So let's see. Let's go to artifact 1, which is input 1, like this, and we have a sound effect.
You have found artifact number 1.
There you go. And you'll notice that all the interruptibles are off now, and this has now disabled input 1. Okay. And something I did not mention last show that I want to point out here, you will notice that it says, note that disabled inputs are still used for multi-input to go to. So when you disable the inputs, it only affects interruptible by, in case you need to have multiple inputs. Because it was explained to me why, but just so you're aware, it can still affect multi-input go to. It doesn't affect it affects interruptible by. It does not affect multi-input go to. Just so you're aware of that. So anyway, once artifact 1 has been placed and the sound effect has been placed, it is now going to a scene called wait for next, and input 1 can no longer be triggered via this. All right, so now we're going to wait for next. You'll see here, and now it is now waiting for all of these, right? So what happens is, to go to success, it is waiting for all 6 artifacts to be placed. But because we turned off input 1, this scene can no longer be triggered. Even though it's checked, it can no longer be triggered. It's now just dead, essentially. It's dead to us. So now it's waiting for all the other ones. So it's the same idea. You hit artifact 2, and boom, and again.
You have found artifact number 2.
There you go. Artifact number 2 has been found, and the same thing has happened. Just the input has been disabled, but it is kept alive for a multi-input, and now we're going to wait for next, and it's just a whole bunch of that. It's a whole bunch of just waiting for it's the same thing over and over again. So even though the inputs, the interruptible buys can't trigger again, once all 6 of these are found, we will jump to success, which is sitting here at ambient 2, and here's our success scene. And you'll notice that it will turn on a light or something here, like this is probably an LED of some sorts, and then after about 3-ish seconds, it unlocks the door. So this would also probably has a sound effect. You hear like a whoosh or a noise, and then the door would unlock, which is always nice. You don't always have to have the door pop immediately. You can choose when it pops open to match with a sound effect or a video or something like that. So now you'll notice down here, after the scene, we go to wait for reset, which is ambient 3. And again, all these are open, and you've got a sound effect playing.
Congratulations. You have located all 6 artifacts.
Okay, so that's right there. Now, technically, that, in my opinion, that's where that sound effect should be here on the success scene, but either way, it still works, right? So now it is sitting here waiting for a reset, and yeah, it's weird that actually this sound effect should be over here on success. I don't know why it isn't, because what's going to happen is this is waiting for reset. It's going to loop and constantly play this sound effect. So I think that was a mess up on their end, but you get the idea. This sound effect should be in the previous scene. So just so you know. But anyway, yeah, now this is waiting for reset. Now and then of course input 7 is your reset. Reset scene goes to your first ready scene, and you'll notice that this is why all the inputs have been re-enabled, because technically they have all been disabled. So that is one thing to remember when you disable your inputs or outputs. Make sure to re-enable them in your reset scene or your start scene right here, because otherwise they ain't gonna do anything. So this is pretty straightforward scene, and you can get the idea of what's going on here. This is just showing you how you can have multiple, things happen, different a scene for each artifact out of order. Again, this is an out of order puzzle, not you don't have to find them in order. So there you go. Show 205, this is the 2-input secret code, and it's an 8-step code using only 2 inputs. So technically you could just use a flex for this. You wouldn't need a flex max for this, because it just uses 2 inputs, but then you wouldn't have a reset button if you wanted that. You'd have to program it to auto reset itself. So, and you can see the combination, of course, is very simple. It's just a whole bunch of 1s and 2s, technically. But if you have multiple inputs and all that stuff. So it's, we used a show like this to do a video game arcade cabinet. So it was doing, it was a controller. So the controller was like, it was up, up, down, down, left, right, B, A, start, because we're nerds. And so each press, it was essentially what you're about to see here. So the idle scene is waiting for this. You'll notice that here is this. Oh, let's look at our show settings first. Single shot inputs is here, so it won't accidentally detect multiple inputs, multiple hits, and of course your maglock there, right there, maglock. Okay. Let's see. So we're sitting in our idle state, and we are waiting for input 1 and to go to step 2. All right, and step 2 is input 1. Again, this could have been used here, but whatever. But what's interesting about this is you'll notice that when you do this, you can actually have something turn on or whatever is going on here. So by pressing what's happening here is because you saw the code earlier. The code is 1121 da 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 da, right? So right now it's looking for input 1, and then it's looking for input 1 again, which then will take us to step 3. And now it's looking for input 2, and now it is looking again for input 1, and then it will look for input 2 again. So it's, as you can see, you're basically hitting 2 buttons in just a certain sequence. And down here, you'll notice if you hit the wrong button, it will take you back to the idle state, and you have to start all over again. So if this is something where you're having some sort of controller or multiple buttons, like let's say you have 3 buttons and you need them done in a certain certain order, like a kind of like a code, almost like a keypad but not kind of thing. Actually, you could use this. Let's say you had your own custom keypad set up, like that was not a normal keypad matrix. This is how you could do a keypad code if it was set up like some sort of stone tablet or something like that. So again, everything it's a little bit of the same thing. You're just going through each one of these, inputting between 1 and 2 here, and you'll notice that here this changes to one of the selected inputs. I'm not entirely sure why, it just does, because you only have 1 input, but you'll notice when you finally get to that last scene, basically each button press is its own scene, right? So you could put a sound effect here, you could put lights happening, stuff like that. But anyway, when you get to that last one, when you've done the correct thing, it'll take you up to here and give you your pass.
Congratulations.
Like that, maglock opens, lights up, bibbidi-bobbidi-boo, magic. And then of course this then goes to wait for reset, which is right here, and then this is of course is waiting for input 8 to go to input 8 to go to idle, right? This is what we talked about earlier, using something like this to skip a reset scene and just take you right to here, right? So and you'll notice this is looking for step 2, right? Because technically it's waiting for step 2, so it's technically step 1. The naming is a little odd because technically you are here, so it goes to step 2, but it's technically waiting for step 1. It's very interesting. You can name these whatever you want, whatever makes sense to you within character limits stuff, but don't name them something ridiculously long because it's not good for it. So that is the input secret code. Now we're going to go into this multiple code show. This is a more involved version of the 2-input secret code, similar to how input sequence with feedback was different from simple input sequence, just so you know. So let's look at our show settings here. Single shot inputs for 1, 2, 3, 4, as you can see there. Nothing else really going on here. We have interruptible by in the ambient scene, and we have this special function going on here that says reset all scenes to -0. And what that means is when one of these buttons is pressed, it forces every scene pretty much, or that particular scene, all scenes actually, to jump to .0. So you're at input 1-0 will reset to -0, 2-0. They'll all reset back to there. That's just to force everything back to where it basically back to 1 where it needs to be. So you've got your interruptibles here, right? And because you have all these different codes, you have code 1243, 2314. You have all these different codes, but each one starts with one of these numbers, 1, 2, or 3, or 4. So you can start at any of these positions right here, and I believe 5 and 6 are for reset and stuff like that. So ignore 5 and 6 for now. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So if you start at 4, or actually let's start at 1. So we'll start at 1, and 1, each button press is its own scene, right? So and you'll notice each scene here each particular button press is under its own scene. That's why you have input 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 3, like that. And the interruptibles started off by going to the start of the scene. So input 1 goes to input 1, input 2 goes to input 2 at the start of this scene. But if we go to the next scene, we're now using multi-input go to, because otherwise, if we hit 2 here, we'd end up in a different place. So that's why we jump from one to the other. So now it's just waiting for the button presses in a particular order. And of course, any other input will take us back to ambient idle, as you can see here. And then after scene go to is ambient next scene here, which of course is just the idle scene. That's all that means. It's like, hey, go to the next scene, and that's just going to be idle. So this should be idle instead of next scene, but whatever. So if you don't enter the code quick enough, you end up going back to start, essentially. So again, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you have this final scene here that is the win state that turns on an output. Let's say it turns on an LED or something like that. And then it goes back to idle. It'll jump back to the idle state, and now it's waiting for another code to do something. And again, it is just more of the same thing over and over again. So now, let's say you need this code. You go to 2314, right? So you start with 2, and now it says hit 3. It's waiting for 3, and then it's waiting for 1, and then it's waiting for 4. And again, every screw up will take you back to idle, or you'll win. And it's just the same thing over and over and over again. So this is not one of those things that is technically a finish the puzzle and unlock a door. This is put in a code, get a piece of information, play a video, something like that, and you use these 4 codes to accomplish various things, to like open boxes that get you pieces. So like something like this would be used in conjunction with the artifacts scene that we just did a little bit ago, where you would get an artifact from a box after you hit this code, and then you would put that in place, etc., etc., etc. So this one's pretty self-explanatory because it's based off the last one. It's just a little more involved, and of course, the win states could have sound effects and lights and things like that. All right, so this show is very interesting. I've never actually seen this in a room, but I'm sure it exists somewhere. So this is the key slide, and you have a key. Let's say it's strung across some cables through like a cabinet or something like that. You have 2 locks, and you have to unlock both keys in a certain amount of time, or else the thing resets itself, right? So let's take a look at that. Here's your idle state, and technically this is just sitting here waiting for when the game boots up. So right now, what's happening is because of the show settings here, you'll notice single shot inputs, and your normally closed output 5, which is your maglock kind of thing, or whatever it is. So that's your maglock. It is open currently because this blue field has been filled in. And so this is just sitting here waiting. and what's your and so this scene is waiting. This is essentially kind of a reset scene because the actual game start is input 3. Input 3 now locks everything and resets the game. This is kind of this is your starting position basically. Okay, so you'll notice here that we have key 1 red, key 1 green, key 2 key red green, and so these are LEDs, and this means these are red. This is a red LED, and this is on right now. These are both red. This lets you know when you've unlocked something correctly. And here is your interruptible by. And there's 2 paths. This game is set up with 2 paths, and there's a right way and a wrong way. So let's walk through the right way first. Okay. So the right way starts off with input 1, which would be lock 1. So you have now unlocked lock 1. And you'll notice that it is correct because now the green lights. You unlock it, that light turns green, and a timer starts. And you're like, oh crap, we need to get this done in 5.5 seconds, which seems a little short to me, but you can obviously elongate that because it gives you this. You'll notice the audio is way longer than the scene is. And that's so you can adjust this for yourself. Like if you need to give them 10 seconds, 20 seconds to get through the scene, that's what that's about. Just so you know. So then you'll notice here input 2, which is the second lock, leads us to success, right? Which is here. No, I'm sorry. That's if you're using interruptible by. You'll know this input 2 goes to success. So there's your success scene right here, and you'll notice both outputs are green. People are happy that you succeeded. And now at the end that scene, it goes to your unlock scene, which means that your maglock is unlocked and your lights are green. Lights are green, trap is clean. And now this just sits looping in this state until you relock the room with this button. Input 3, interruptible by 3, goes back to your lock state, and so now the game is reset. So there's a false path that you can disable this. You can make this not a thing if you don't want to, and they talk about it in the little write-up. So if you hit this, we'll see what happens. You end up going the wrong way, but key 2 gets unlocked. You'll see here. This turns green because it's unlocked, but when you try to do input 1, and you'll also notice here after the scene, it goes to wrong way slow, which means you've gone the wrong way. And one thing you'll notice over here when we're at this thing, after scene go to, if you don't do this in a certain amount of time, you end up going to the too slow scene like this, which gives you that sound effect. So that way you know, oh, I didn't do that fast enough or whatever, and then it resets itself. But anyway, so if you don't get this done in the right time, this goes to wrong way slow, which means you were too slow, and it plays a sound effect. The old trusty, rusty, sad trombone, and then that goes back and locks everything and resets it. If you do it this way and you actually jump it over to wrong way end, you also end up again with your sad trombone because you've done it incorrectly. So there's a right path and a wrong path, and you can get rid of the wrong path if necessary. So it's a very interesting physical puzzle I'd like to see somebody make, actually. This is another interesting puzzle. This almost sounds like, it starts out sounding like a Simon Says type puzzle, but it ends up not being one. You can do Simon Says type puzzles, by the way, in Director. We've done it and it works. So you have lights. Let's say you have 6 LEDs or light up buttons, and you have to figure out which light came on last and hit the button that lit up last, which is very interesting because this is like one of these puzzles I've never actually seen in a room, and it's it seems very unique because of that. So let's take a look at what's going on. Nothing going on here. Everything is as it should be here, and then over here are scene settings. Nothing interesting here, except for that. So right now, idle is sitting idle, as you'll notice. And it is this button 7 is the game start. So let's say that this is just sitting, your controller's just chilling out, and then another puzzle activates this, it goes to start. So now the game is ready to go. This is technically the start of the game, and So this is just kind of here as a buffer scene. Technically, you wouldn't need this. You could use a multi-input go-to to just jump right to pattern 1 intro, but this is just the way they've done it. So you go to pattern 1 intro, and this gives you a little audio. Basically, this is kind of setting up a scene. This is using scenes to kind of give you more context. So pattern 1 intro is
level 1.
Tells you it's level 1, and at the end of that, it shows you the lights. And you'll notice here is your outputs. The last one is output 1 here, but this would light up. Bam. So after that, it's going to a waiting scene. Now it's like, okay, I've showed you what you need. Do something. And now it's just waiting for you to hit the right button. So it's waiting for button 1. Of course, if you don't do it quick enough, you end up failing. You have to do it. It's another timed puzzle. So you end up going here and fail. And then it goes back to the light pattern. It starts over. But if you hit the right button, you go to this scene and you win. Yay! So again, this is just repeats. It just repeats different variations of the game at this point. So now it goes to pattern 2 intro, and same thing. You'll notice it's the exact same thing over and over and over again here. And then pattern 3 win, of course. Same thing, win, and then this goes back to idle over here. But this should then take you to another scene, a win scene. Something unlocks, something happens. So there you go. This one's pretty self-explanatory, especially if you've watched all the other explanations. And finally, we have the standstill example here. Now this is a puzzle we've actually used. We've made a version of this based off of this game, and this uses PIR sensors, passive infrared motion sensors, for ease, to determine if people are moving around, and if they stand still for long enough, success. So we'll kind of walk you through that. Here's your idle scene here. Now notice that this is using a 8 output flex, not a flex max. So just be aware of that, because the flex only has 2 inputs. So we are only dealing with 2 inputs on this and 8 outputs. So our show settings, we have our single shot input at a 1. We have our normally closed output, our maglock here, as you can see, and it is currently open. It's sitting in the idle state there. And then our scene settings, we have the arming delay. And what this means is this is to arm the infrared, to arm the game, basically start the game and get out of the room, so the motion sensor doesn't see anything. So that's basically what this scene is doing right now, as you can see. So also I want to see, now normally a lot of times you would have startup delay for motion sensor up here. However, we don't need that for this game because of this idle arming delay scene. It kind of acts as that already. So if we go to the arming delay, you can see that there's nothing going on here, but it is it's kind of a bridge to jump from one scene to the next, and you can elongate this to how long you need it, right? Because you'll notice the next scene it goes to is armed. Okay, so let's say you need to hit a button and it takes you, I don't know, 10 seconds to walk out of the room. I don't know why it would, but so you would you take this to be like 15 seconds, or you have to lock something after resetting. Anyway, regardless, this can be adjusted to how long you need it to, and now it goes to the armed scene. So now what's happening is the infrared is looking for movement. Okay, and what happens is, right now the room is sitting still, okay? Because all input 1 does is arm the room. Input 2 determines movement. That's really all that's going on here, okay? And you'll notice after the scene it's just looping armed, okay? So once you enter the room and put players into the room, or the players enter the room from another room, the motion sensor will detect them, and now it's going to the standstill scene. Now, these little blue dots are the timer counters. Like, if you wanted an LED that blinks when people stand still for them to figure this out, like, that's your clue, then you can leave this here. Again, I just left this as a test, so when I was, a timer test when I was setting up the room. So, or you could just get rid of this entirely. You don't need this to run the game. It's just part of it. So now you'll notice down here that after scene go to is if you hold still, basically if you hold still and don't trip any of these, right? Because you'll notice that you have both of these checked. You have interruptible by 2 and 1. This is kind of a reset. If you need to go, if the game master needs to go back in the room and start the game over, or if they need to go back in and do something, this is for the game master to hit input 1 to reset the puzzle. This will take us to they moved, essentially. So if somebody's in the room and they move, it's basically like pressing a button. Yeah, that's all it is. Remember, everything is a button. So the infrared or the motion sensor is a button. So if they move, the button is pressed, and then it goes to this scene, which goes back to standstill. Right? It's constantly movement constantly triggers it to start this timer over. Every time they move, you end up coming back to this scene over and over and over and over and over again. Okay. However, if they stand still long enough for 10 seconds, you get success. And it goes to here, which then makes people cheer for you. And then the door unlocks, your light comes on, whatever your LED is here. And then it goes into the success loop, which is just these two things on without a sound effect, and it just loops and loops and loops and loops until you hit 1, which takes you to the arming delay, and you start the whole sequence over again. So that it's actually a very easy puzzle to make, and it's a very effective a puzzle that you don't see a lot in escape rooms. So I encourage you to kind of mess with this one if you can. Just make sure you get the right motion sensors. Get the good ones. Don't get the little cheapy ones, the small guys off of, like, unless you're using a small prop. Like a whole room, you want a big infrared sensor, not one of the little dinky ones that are cheap on Amazon. So those are all of the director examples. I hope this helps you understand more about how they work and how certain puzzles work. And if you have any questions, let us know.